Welcome back to the big interview right here with Pride365 Certified. Give us a follow at Pride365 Certified. And of course, be sure to follow our partners as well. InterPride, we are, of course, powered by InterPride, a global organization that is doing great things. And of course, Pride365 are empowering organizations to be true catalysts for real change. Look out for some of their great work with amazing brands like Nissan, Hilton, Boohoo, Utilita, and many more. Enough of that. Speaking of greatness, I'm honored to be joined here today by a very, very special guest, an absolute hero in healthcare, and also an author, an amazing book, Nurses on the Inside, Stories of the HIV/AIDS Epidemic in New York. And of course, a Pride365 Pride365 Champion. Welcome, Ellen Matzer, to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. I love it. You have some canines too who have a lot to say. Very opinionated.
Yeah. It's snowing here, and she's barking at the snowflakes, and my husband out shoveling. So
I love it.
Barks going on.
Brilliant stuff. Great stuff. So let's talk a little bit about you before we get stuck into the book.
Okay.
Whenever we do our big interview with our guests, we like to take it a little bit back, to where you grew up and how you came to be, what your story is. I know you grew up in California and moved to New York, but what's your story and how does it tie to the community?
Well, I actually was born in New York and then spent my early childhood years in California and came back to New York based on my father's job opportunities. It's interesting. He was a chiropractor in the 1950s when chiropractics was considered voodoo. So we lived upstate New York where he couldn't get a practice going, which is surprising because chiropractic is so mainstream now. And holistic. But anyway, so we spent a couple of years in California. I came back to New York when I was probably in about 4th grade and spent the rest of my time here. Various parts of New York, the boroughs, Queens, and now I'm a Long Islander. But I became a nurse. I went to nursing school at age 18 for my first 2 years of nursing school. And it was my dad who convinced me to be a nurse because I had no interest in nursing back then. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I actually went into pre-law for a little bit and then realized that all that political science wasn't for me. And it was my dad who said, listen, there's a nursing school down the block from where his office was. He owned the Manhattan Penny Saver, which was Pace University. He said, go to nursing school. You get a 2-year degree and have it as a fallback. So when I first went to nursing school, I hadn't intended to be a nurse. I just intended to get a nursing degree and then do something else. Well, after my first clinical experience in the hospital, I said, wow, like this is for me. So I really just loved it, and I fell in love with nursing. And then I finished my 2 years of nursing school. My first job was in a like a city hospital system where they were so short staffed. This is 1978. They put me in the critical care unit like right away. A brand new grad. I was terrified, and they trained me for critical care, and I was just horrified. I had no idea what I was doing, and then they just like kind of released me and said, here's your 6 critical patients. And I mean, I have memories, like nightmares of that. At 9 months into that first job, I quit because they just kept increasing the amount of patients I needed to take care of. And I went into the city to Roosevelt Hospital, which is actually where the book begins. And I said, I went to the recruiter because nurses were just in demand everywhere. You could just walk in and have a job the same day. So I went into the recruiter thinking, nah, maybe I don't want to go into critical care. Maybe I'll try like OBGYN. And the recruiter said to me, "Oh no, you're an ICU nurse. We need you in ICU for sure." So I was back, I'm 20. I said,
Mm.
okay. So they put me in ICU, and it was a different ICU. Like, it was a real, a well-run ICU. That's where I met Valerie, who's my co-author and best friend for over 40 years now. And we
Beautiful.
we met, and that's in 79, 80. That's when we started seeing this very strange disease, which later we
Mm.
called AIDS. Um,
Ellen, how long
Point.
before that 79, 80? Because if maybe my maths is off, but I remember it becoming really prevalent in the news around 84, 85. Like, I remember being a youngster seeing this news story, and you
Mm,
could feel like the panic in the broadcast, and how
correct.
it became a story that was dominant every single day in
Right.
England. What was that gap like, knowing maybe, wow, this is going to be big, and then to that moment and the gap in between, how long was it?
Well, it was several years. I mean, remember back in the late 70s, early 80s, of course, no cell phones, no social media, no computers.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
we started to see basically young men. We didn't even, consider sexuality at that point. Just young men coming in with a constellation of symptoms and dying very quickly. It was, and we did not know that we were not the only hospital seeing it. We thought we were seeing a constellation of patients combined to our hospital. There was no inter-hospital reporting. There's no sharing of information in the area of New York City. So we didn't know that at the same time, when Valerie and I were in Roosevelt Hospital, that they were seeing the same thing in St. Vincent's and Montefiore and all the boroughs.
Mm.
And so it wasn't until the 80s, 83, when all of a sudden the term grid got coined early on, probably about 81, gay related immune deficiency. And then we started to realize more and more about this syndrome, which was bloodborne. And it wasn't confined to a population of gay men. It was
Mhm.
a sexually transmitted, a bloodborne disease, um, initially confined, well, not confined, but only gay men were presenting to the hospital, likely because a lot of men back then were affluent, had health care, had insurance, and were seeking health care. It was the
Mm.
population of women, injection drug users, sex workers that were marginalized and not seeking health care. So probably a lot of them died in the shadows, so to speak. And it wasn't until, 83 that the test was developed, the ELISA test for HTLV3, it was called, and then later called HIV. And then, of course, it became extremely political, as it did everywhere. And our own
Mhm.
president didn't even mention the word AIDS until 85. And then really no money was put into researching it. And everybody was just thinking that, these people who had AIDS were disposable. Um,
Yeah, just
Go
c-
ahead.
I'm going to ask a question as though I'm learning about this for the first time, because I find it fascinating in terms of the media we knew then and now the media we know now, the transparency that exists in today's world a little bit more, the good and the bad about social media. At the time, were you, as someone in the front lines and who had been experiencing this for a number of years, was there some annoyance that it was kind of promoted, seen, labeled, reported on as a gay disease?
Um, I'm trying to, can you just ask that again? Was it reported
So,
as
in
a
terms of when it was first reported, the sensationalistic
yeah,
aspect, maybe the aim at going after the community, was that
yeah.
something that was an annoyance to the people behind the scenes working every single day diligently to figure this out, to save lives?
We did, I mean, from a purely scientific perspective, we were concentrating on gay men because of the practice of anal sex. It was originally thought that perhaps the anal mucosa was tearing and ripping, and that is why so many gay men got AIDS quickly, because
Mm.
of the amount of HIV that's in semen that then entered the bloodstream. So it was purely scientific, but we didn't figure that out right away. I mean, we started doing sexual histories on everybody that came in with constellations of symptoms like that. So, but it was a matter of who like sought healthcare at the time. And I'm sure, as I said, there were women who didn't seek healthcare. Mothers, for example, later on in my career, who came into the system late because mothers don't leave their children. And
Mm.
it was thought that women didn't get AIDS, and then we realized, of course, they were getting AIDS because they were having sexual contact with somebody who had AIDS or who was HIV positive, and also women back in those early days were a lot of them were sex workers back in the trans community, in the ballroom community. But they were lost to healthcare. They had no insurance. They were considered disposable. So I think a lot of people died unnoticed. But it was gay men who started activism, gay men's health
Mhm.
crisis, ACT UP. All of those were gay men who were not going to be silent. And that's what started the momentum to get the government to look at this disease for everybody. But it was
Mm.
a group of gay men who started all of these activist groups, and then
Yeah.
other people joined.
Yeah, they sure did, and you're right. Other people joined, and before you know it, multiple movements begin. I want to take you into that moment just a little bit before we move into the reasons behind the book. And I liken it. I was thinking about this last night when I was thinking about our conversation, and I was trying to think the closest thing in terms of being in the trenches as a healthcare worker during that time. Maybe the closest thing would be COVID, and maybe how that started off, and the challenges with having to deal with that. And I know that since you've written a second book as well that talks about that a little bit, would you it must be also weird to have lived in the time you mentioned, lack of phones, lack of technology, and to not have had that during one crisis and had it all in the other. I can't imagine the differences and the experiences you had, being a nurse at that time and then dealing with what happened just 3 years ago.
Hmm. Um, well, yeah. I mean, if we're looking for a parallel, I mean, for one thing, I mean, since the COVID-19 virus originated in Wuhan and it was considered to be a novel virus, meaning new, meaning never found in humans before, which jumped from animal to person.
Mm.
And you mentioned the differences in media coverage. Well, I mean, the scores of people that died of COVID were just ticked off every day, and of course, the political climate here in the United States was one that was quite different at the time. But a virus, HIV is a virus, COVID is a virus. Viruses don't discriminate. Um, but with COVID, it was a direct respiratory transfer, whereas HIV was a blood transfer. So what comes to mind for me is that back in the late 70s, early 80s through the 90s, many considered high risk behavior, sexual behavior, as deviant, injection
Mhm.
drug use deviant. So it was their fault. Whereas with COVID, it wasn't your fault. You walked into a supermarket and came in contact with somebody who had COVID. Next day, you were dead. I mean, I was only partially on the front lines during COVID. So we wrote that book, Beyond the Mask, from the viewpoint of other nurses who were on the front lines of COVID. Um,
Mm. I
uh,
find it interesting, Ellen, only because, at the beginning of AIDS, it was like there was this total fear to touch someone, hug someone, even give someone a kiss on the cheek. And of course, with COVID, there was no contact. The fear of that, not being able to see your loved ones in hospital, and those comparisons are pretty close as well, aren't they?
mhm.
Between the two.
Oh,
Um,
yes,
no,
yes.
go on. Sorry, please
Well,
finish your
I mean,
thought.
at the beginning, like in the 70s, we wore PPE like crazy. I mean, there were people that were so frightened they were wearing double gowns and double masks and double gloves and OR hats and booties. And I worked in a couple of hospitals during that time, before we worked in designated aid centers, where it was mandatory that the patients with AIDS or suspected AIDS had were put on very strict isolation.
Mm,
And it was unnecessary. All we needed was bloodborne precautions, which means wear gloves if you're drawing blood or going to deal with body fluids. But the fear was so rampant, and it was also fear of the people that were getting it. The people that were getting it were gay, injection drug users, sex workers. I mean, the people that were considered disposable. COVID,
yeah.
however, was affecting everybody, all walks of life. Whether you were wealthy, whether you were poor, you walked into an emergency room and you were put in a room, and one minute you were on your cell phone and the next minute you were on a ventilator, and we ran out of PPE, where nurses were scrambling. They were going to fishing stores getting those fly fishing suits to wear uh, to work, because the government wasn't providing enough PPE. I mean, we had plenty of PPE back then in the 80s. We just didn't have a need for it because there was so much ignorance about it.
Yeah. Um, we're talking to Ellen Matzer, who authored a great book, a book that she actually didn't really want to write. And Nurses on the Inside Stories of the HIV/AIDS Epidemic in New York. You didn't want to write it, but when you did become a Pride 365 champion, I went back and I read up on some of the stuff that you had written. And there were a couple of quotes from when you became a Pride 365 champion. And I just wanted to read them out because I thought they were exceptionally deep and moving, in terms of, maybe the rationale between not wanting to write the book first and then writing it. I had a profound life experience, one that will never be duplicated. I need to report being a witness to one of the most horrific, painful, yet poignant pieces of history in healthcare. I witnessed a generation of people never get to reach their potential. That last line, especially, is hard hitting. And then this one, too. I got to walk through a devastating illness with many. I came out a better nurse, one that tolerated sadness, ambiguity, inevitable death. I got to care for so many unbelievably brave people. I need this book to bear witness to all of that. These talented, young, brave patients are part of our nation's history, and I feel compelled to tell their story. Takes a very special person to not only dedicate their career and their life to others, but then also, a lot of people just walk away and they're spent and they don't have any energy left. The sponge is totally wrung out. And here you are writing a book, being, as you said, a witness to their lives. And at the same time, also the proceeds from the book go to scholarships for new nurses as
Yes.
well. Talk
Yes.
to us about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, as far as those statements, I mean, I remember them because yes, I was a visitor on this program with somebody else years ago, and I mean, I did write it with a colleague, Valerie Hughes, and I did write the book on a dare. It was a childhood friend of mine that we hadn't seen each other in like decades, and I had a gathering of my friends that I went to grade school with, and it was like, okay, so what have you been doing for the last 50 years? And I said, oh well, I worked in the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and they were like, you did? And one of them said, you should write a book. And I said, oh, who's going to want to read that? Basically, Valerie and I thought we were just doing our jobs. I mean, that was I mean, yes, it was a calling for me because, and I'll tell you something that I'll never ever forget. Back then, before the internet, where nurses found jobs was the New York Times, and there was a big article in the New York Times said, "Your contribution to human health is most critical at this time. Please come join our dedicated AIDS unit at St. Clair's Hospital in New York City." And that was right when I was working at a critical care unit in Queens, and where they were so absolutely out of their minds with isolation gear. And a
Mm.
patient that I had there actually died because they wouldn't use a special bag, an ambu bag, which is something that breathes for the patient as they travel to the OR. They wouldn't use a special bag because they didn't want to have to throw it out after they used it on an AIDS patient. And as soon as
Oh,
that
dear
happened,
God.
I quit. And I said, all right, I need to join St. Clair's. And I was the first nurse hired there in 1985. The unit opened in 1985. I was there in 1985. I was there when Mother Teresa brought the first of 6 patients from Ossining Prison. They got them
Wow.
medically furloughed, and we cared for them. They're written about in the book. 3 of them specifically that I cared for personally, and their stories are there. And so after all was said and done, and again, it took us over a year to get the book published. I mean, nobody wanted to publish the book. They said it wasn't commercial enough, it wouldn't sell. Nobody was interested. And this was like 2016, 17. Book came out in 2019 after a year's worth of revision. We're currently I'll just say it. We're in a dispute with the publisher because
Oh, no.
they basically own us. We did not have adequate representation because we just wanted the book out there since we had so many rejections. We let this mom and pop operation publish the book, and they basically took the copyright for derivatives, most of the money. I mean, we don't get, we didn't make very much money off the book at all. But what we did make, we did donate to scholarships. So we're we now have an attorney working on getting our copyright back because it's our legacy. It's my life. I mean, somebody owns my life rights, and now I'm angry about it.
Yeah, you should be very angry about it.
Yes, but when we wrote the second book, we self-published it, and so
Good
we
move.
do own the rights to that. But
You should do what Taylor Swift did and just get the original of the book, tweak a couple of things and then re-release it.
well, that's one of the things that may be on the table is actually a rewrite of the book. But I think the biggest thing that just happened, and I think I might have emailed you the article, is that people follow me from the AIDS Memorial on Instagram. I'm guessing you're familiar with Stuart from the AIDS Memorial on Instagram, who has this huge page, which does nothing but memorialize people who died of AIDS. And somebody from there started to follow me. And it turns out this actress, her name is Debbie Mazur, and she is an actress in her own right, but she is best friends with Madonna. And it was based on her wanting to know more about what really happened, stuff that she has a gap in, because she was a teen back in New York City during the AIDS crisis. She hung out with the ballroom crowd and the danceteria and the gay men, along with Madonna. So they were like volunteers at all these hospitals. And so she said that reading my book gave her missing pieces that she didn't know at the time. And then it was through her that she contacted Madonna's people. And I was invited to the concert where Madonna gave us a shout out. And
Amazing.
I have it recorded. I mean, it was I was so blown away. I mean, it's the most amazing thing that's happened in my life, to be recognized by such an icon.
Yeah.
And then realize that people just, follow nurses on the inside, but they also follow the AIDS Memorial on Instagram, which is a huge contribution to the world of remembering the lost people. What is remembered lives is the moniker. And I'm in touch with Stuart all the time from the AIDS Memorial. He's the one that put together all of the photos that Madonna used in the concert for Live to Tell. And he worked so hard on that. And, I really would want to give a shout out to him. He lives in Scotland, by the way.
Oh, that's wonderful, and it's an incredible legacy, isn't it? And thanks to people like you and Stuart, and what you described in one of your quotes, these people deserve for their life to be recognized, and especially during a time where maybe if that was happening now with medicine advanced and technology the way it is, many of them would still be, alive today. So keeping their memories alive the way they have, and to be fair to artists like Madonna and Elton John and many others out there who aren't as well known, who do the great work that they do, and you see it all the time through your book and in your circle. I'm sure of it.
I mean, we do. I mean, this Madonna by far has been the largest, celebrity that has taken an interest. I mean, we've had some smaller celebrities, but when you're relatively unknown, to nurses from New York, I mean, a lot of people said, well, who are they? As we get a little bit more attention, people start to reach out to us, just as you have, and want to hear the story, because I mean, AIDS is over 40 years old now, and we still have no cure.
Wow.
We have
That's
no
incredible.
COVID is still here. People, I just had COVID at Christmas, and like people like, COVID schmovid, it's like the flu, it's like any other virus now. It's not the variant that it was when it first came as a novel virus, because everybody has a little bit of immunity now because everybody's been exposed to COVID.
Yes.
But again, we lost. This is the first time. I mean, now that we have a whole generation of people that were at risk back then in the 70s, 80s, 90s. We missed a generation. We lost them all. We just lost a whole generation of men and women. And now we have a generation because we have medicines that keep the HIV at bay, where people can live undetectable and live essentially normal lives.
You mentioned Madonna and her being a hero to the community, and part of the philosophy at Pride365 is that inclusivity has to matter 365 days a year, but that inclusivity also comes full swing. That means everybody. That means us talking to each other, understanding each other, whether we agree, whether we disagree. And in medicine, I'm sure, that when there's so much at stake, when science is in discussion, there's a lot of agreements, disagreements. And as I said, you mentioned Madonna. I wanted to know, like, in all the years you've been working in the field, you've written a book, you've worked alongside people you've agreed and disagreed with. If you could pick your medical Mount Rushmore, what people? I hope there are four. I'm pretty sure. I know I'm a Brit, but I'm sure there's four presidents on Mount Rushmore. What does your medical Mount Rushmore look like?
Whoa, that's a tough one. Medical. Well, I mean, I have to say that, it was really, really tough. There have been so many people that, number one, had such a profound impact on my life. I mean, and not in the way, like, there were some terrific physicians we worked with, some terrific nurses, like my colleague Valerie. My former husband was in the profession too. He was a nurse and he worked with people with AIDS at the very beginning too. But I have to say that the patients that are in the book, the ones that I had the most connection to, and the ones whose stories of their illness, unfortunately, I mean, I didn't get to know people when they weren't ill back in those days. Those people I would put high up there. I having had such a profound effect on me as a nurse and as a human being, and watching what they went through to try to live. I mean, I don't know if you've read the book, but the stories revolve around different patients and their whole stories with dialogue that was actually happened, and but their desire and their just dream of becoming cured and being well and doing what they did, for a living, which was a lot of them were professional actors, models, businessmen. Those people, are the people whose shoulders I stand on.
Wow.
Those are the people who I will never, they are tattooed in my heart. And I have to say, those would be my Mount Rushmore. And I mean,
That's
I have to say that Madonna's right up there because of her support. I mean, she's an icon. I mean, and
yeah,
the
she
fact
is.
that she just even mentioned us is like overwhelming to me. But whether she mentioned us or not, I mean, it's still those people that left us far too soon. Their lives were unfinished, that I have to, put up there and always, always really worship.
Perfectly said and perfectly put. What do you think LGBT plus the community history month highlighting medicine as the theme? What would you like to see from that? I think it's a huge deal in the sense that so much has happened over the last 3 years. Now you're taking us back to a time that an entire generation experienced either through being touched by the disease, through the pop culture component and element of it, and the community is so ingrained in the pop culture side of things as well. But the acknowledgement of medicine, what do you think about that?
The acknowledgement of medicine, as in,
As
treatment.
in as in the theme of a history month for the community. As a person who's given their life to healthcare, is a Pride365 champion, has done so much for the community as well, written a book about it. The acknowledgement that medicine is the theme. What's your take on that?
Well, I still think that there still is always a problem, I feel, with access to care. We still have marginalized people in this country, in your country, in third world countries. We still have stigma. We still have homophobia. We still have, there are a lot of like social obstacles to getting good medical care. And, you know, I'm not in the field of HIV medicine. I'm in the field of nursing teaching right now. And I try to teach those that I work with in the clinical setting about compassion and empathy.
Mm.
And in Western medicine today, there is this division of just consultation. You don't have your family doctor anymore. There's like no such thing. I don't know medicine in the UK, but here you have a doctor, and then you have a different problem, you go to cardiologist. You have a different problem, you go to gastroenterologist. You have nothing, you go to neurologist. You're just being shuffled around the system.
Mhm.
And nobody, there's no family doctor anymore to take responsibility for your overall care. I see this as my mother ages. She's 92 years old, and she has some medical issues. And, every time her gerontologist, who's supposed to specialize in old people, it wants her to go to a pulmonologist and a cardiologist and a neurologist and an ENT. So I think we have to get back to in medicine, for one person, one physician, if you will, or NP or PA, that has to take responsibility for the overall care and well-being of the patient, and not
Mm-hmm.
farm it all out to different specialties, because then they start to overlap, and then the care starts to interfere. One starts to interfere with the other care. And it's especially happening today in the geriatric population. So that's what I think right now. I mean, as far as HIV medicine, there is some terrific protocols that are still being worked on. The monthly injection of Cabenuva, monoclonal antibody infusion to actually finally find a cure. That I know is happening because the person that took over for Valerie in Weill Cornell Medicine, HIV research, is somebody I know. We both know that we recommended for the job. And there's a lot happening. There's a lot of studies going on. Some of them are not public at this point, but I foresee, and I hope that at some point we can finally say that there are people that are actually cured of this disease.
Yeah, well, very well said. And I agree with you on the elder side of medical and care. I just lost my mother, and the way she was kind of, pulled from pillar to post. And, you know, in some respect, I would say a little bit of a lack of compassion. And there's a lot of times where, someone says, oh, but they're 87. Yeah, but they're 87 to you, but they're our mom, and I agree with you on that front, which is why if that's happening, to a heterosexual woman in a world where, healthcare and, has had a pretty good career and can get access to good healthcare still, then that's why we're here, to protect our community and our people and make sure that people have, basic human rights, healthcare, access to it.
Mm-hmm.
The lack of access is as alarming, like you said. So when I went through that experience with my mom, it kind of brought me back to what we're trying to do here and how we're trying to make, and it's very poignant that you talk about the access and how much you still hear that there is a lack of it, Ellen, in our world today. It's really
Yeah,
alarming, isn't it?
it is very alarming.
Okay, I'm going to leave you with this last one. I promise it won't be as much of a curveball as the medical Mount Rushmore, but we've really appreciated you being here. Before I leave you with this one, everyone can get your book on Amazon. We'll
Yes.
put a link on. We'll share it on our social media. We'll
Mhm.
share it. Nurses on the Inside: Stories of the HIV/AIDS Epidemic in New York. A great book. And co-written with Ellen. And your partner's name again is Valerie?
Valerie Hughes.
Valerie Hughes. Fantastic stuff. You are a Pride 365 champion, and it's a beautiful thing to have someone like you on board, especially in your field and with History Month, as I said, being medicine driven and giving that showcasing and spotlighting people who really do sacrifice a lot. On our side, we're all about inclusivity. When I say the word inclusivity, Ellen Matzer, what do you think of? What does it mean to you?
In inclusivity to me means diversity, equity. I mean, everybody now is talking about DEI everywhere, but inclusivity means not excluding anybody, and that is what my definition. No exclusions,
No,
no matter who you are. You need to have access to healthcare, access to education, access to clean drinking water, housing. That's what inclusivity is to me.
love it. And just to share a few more of Ellen's pictures here, this was Madonna just before she raved about her on stage. Ellen making the headlines there. I was going Helen, and headlines. Too much of
Yes,
a tongue twister, Ellen.
that was my
And
when my daughter snapped a picture of me, when she was speaking, I was shocked. I mean,
it's
so
beautiful.
yes.
It's so fantastic. And I shared this earlier. Here you are, influencing and talking and doing all the great things that you're doing. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it.
Oh,
Are you on
great.
social media? Did you want people to find you on social
I
media?
Well, we are on Instagram as Nurses on the Inside.
Okay, Nurses on the Inside. Please go
Mhm.
give them a follow. And also go buy that book. It's for a good cause too. Remember, the proceeds go to sponsors, scholarships for
Yes,
new nurses.
yes.
Find Ellen Matzer on social media, Nurses on the Inside. Please go get the book and follow at Pride365 too. Until next time, take care. And don't forget to tell your loved ones you love them. It just takes a minute.
Thank
And
you.
remember, be inclusive always. Ellen, thank you so much for everything and for your time today. We appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Bye now.